Out of the car, now! Hands where I can see them!
Wait, I'm not fighting
on
you!
the ground, face down!
Okay, please, I'm
Hands
going.
behind your back, do it now!
I didn't do anything, man. I'm scared.
Stop
Please.
moving, you're under...
The Axon body camera footage showed Officer Neil Crawford walking up to a black Mercedes sedan at 10:38 p.m. on a Tuesday night. What the camera recorded in the next 4 minutes would end his career, spark a federal investigation, and expose a truth that many already knew, but could now see with their own eyes. Because before those 4 minutes were over, Crawford would drag the driver from his car, throw him to the ground, and strike him across the face hard enough to draw blood. That driver wasn't a suspect. He was Edmund Williams, the 48-year-old police chief of the entire department. Crawford had no idea who he was pulling over, and what he did next, captured in high-definition video, would become one of the most watched police body camera clips in the country. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. This story needs to be heard, and your support helps us keep bringing true stories to light. Edmund Williams was 48 years old and carried the weight of history on his shoulders. He was the city's first black police chief, a position he'd earned through 3 decades of service, countless commendations, and a reputation for integrity that even his critics couldn't deny. He'd been appointed 2 years earlier amid calls for reform, accountability, and a fundamental shift in how the department approached community policing. Edmund had answered that call. He'd implemented body cameras on every officer despite union resistance, overhauled use of force policies, established a civilian oversight board, created mandatory training on implicit bias and de-escalation. He'd sat through community forums where people shouted at him, questioned him, demanded he fix problems that had been building for generations. And he'd listened, actually listened. His approach was simple. Policing should be about service, not power. About building trust, not breaking it. About treating every person, regardless of race, class, or circumstance, with the dignity they deserved. That Tuesday night, he'd been at the station late, reviewing use of force reports from the previous month, looking for patterns, identifying officers who might need additional training. It was the kind of detail work that didn't make headlines, but kept the department accountable. When he finally left just after 10, he was exhausted. He'd changed out of his uniform hours earlier, wearing jeans and a simple button-down shirt. His badge and credentials were in his wallet on the passenger seat. His service weapon was locked in his office safe, per his own policy when off-duty. He was just another man driving home through the West District in his personal vehicle, a black Mercedes he'd saved years to buy, a small symbol of the success he'd earned through hard work and sacrifice. He merged onto the boulevard, signaling his lane change, focused on getting home to his wife. He had no idea that in less than a minute, everything would change. Officer Neil Crawford was 25 years old and convinced he was born for this job. He'd graduated from the academy 6 months earlier. Young, athletic, aggressive in a way his instructors had noted with concern but couldn't quite discipline out of him. His training reports showed a pattern. Excellent on physical tactics, weak on judgment and restraint. Officer Crawford demonstrates strong technical skills, but needs to develop better situational awareness and communication. His field training officer had written, tends to escalate situations unnecessarily. Translation, he was too quick to use force and too slow to use his brain. But Crawford had passed probation. Barely. And tonight was his first solo patrol. No training officer riding along. No one second-guessing his decisions. No one telling him to slow down and think. He was finally free to do the job his way. He'd been cruising the West District for 2 hours, making minor stops, writing tickets, feeling the rush of authority that came with the uniform and the badge. His radio was quiet. Traffic was light. He was getting bored. Then he saw the black Mercedes. High-end vehicle. Dark windows. Expensive rims. The kind of car that, in Crawford's mind, didn't belong in this neighborhood at this time of night. The Mercedes changed lanes smoothly, signal blinking. But Crawford's mind was already made up. He muttered under his breath, barely audible on the Bodycam audio. Let's see what you're hiding. He flipped on his lights. The footage is clear, clinical, unforgiving. Blue and red lights reflect off the wet pavement. The Mercedes slows immediately, signals again, and pulls to the curb. Textbook compliance. Crawford exits his cruiser and approaches the driver's side, his hand resting on his duty belt near his weapon. His posture is aggressive, shoulders forward, movements sharp. He doesn't tap on the window. He pounds on it. The window rolls down smoothly. Edmund Williams sits with both hands on the steering wheel, his expression calm, his voice measured. "Good evening, officer." Crawford shines his flashlight directly into Edmund's face, holding it there. "License and registration." "Of course." Edmund's voice remains steady. "They're in my wallet on the passenger seat. I'm going to reach for them slowly." "Don't move yet." Edmund freezes, hands returning to the wheel. "I understand." Crawford circles the vehicle slowly, shining his light through each window, looking for something, anything, that might justify what he's already decided to do. He returns to the driver's side. "Go ahead." "Slow." Edmund reaches across carefully, narrating each movement. "I'm reaching for my wallet now. It's right here on the seat." He retrieves it, pulls out his driver's license, and hands it through the window. Crawford studies it under his flashlight. His tone shifts from professional to patronizing. "Edmund Williams. Nice name. You live around here, Edmund?" "I do." "Interesting." Crawford's voice drips with skepticism. "What do you do for work?" "I'm in law enforcement." Crawford laughs, a short, mocking sound. "Law enforcement. Right. What, like a security guard?" Edmund doesn't take the bait. "Something like that." "Yeah." Crawford leans closer, invading the space at the window. "You know why I stopped you?" "No, officer, I don't." "Your left taillight is out." The narrator's voice cuts in, calm and factual. "It wasn't." The footage would later prove that every light on the vehicle was functioning perfectly. Crawford orders Edmund to step out of the vehicle. Edmund's expression shifts, just slightly. Not fear, just the recognition of where this is heading. "May I ask why?" "Because I'm telling you to. Step out." "Officer, I haven't committed any." "Step out of the vehicle now, or I'll remove you myself." Edmund exhales slowly. He opens the door, moves deliberately, and steps onto the pavement with his hands raised slightly, visible, non-threatening. Crawford moves in close, too close, invading space, asserting dominance. "You got anything on you I should know about? Weapons? Drugs?" "No, officer." "You mind if I search you?" "I'd prefer you didn't without probable cause." That was the moment Crawford's demeanor changed completely. His jaw clenched. His hand moved to Edmund's shoulder, not guiding, grabbing. "Turn around." Hands on the hood. "Officer, I'm not resisting, but I'd like to know what." Hands on the hood. Edmund complies, placing his palms flat on the warm metal of the Mercedes. His voice remains calm, almost gentle. "There's a badge in my wallet. I'm a police officer. If you'll just..." "I don't care what you say you are." Edmund reaches slowly toward his back pocket. "My credentials are right. Don't move." Crawford's hand shoots out, grabbing Edmund's wrist. Hard. Twisting it. "I'm not." Crawford yanks Edmund backward, spins him around, and shoves him against the car. Edmund's head snaps forward from the impact. "You don't listen, do you?" "Officer, please." Crawford grabs Edmund by the collar and the belt, rips him away from the vehicle, and throws him to the ground. The body cam captures everything. The sound of Edmund's body hitting the asphalt. The groan. The way his hands instinctively move to protect his head. And then Crawford's forearm comes down. A sharp, brutal blow across Edmund's jaw. Blood appears instantly, dark against Edmund's skin, spreading from a split lip. Edmund doesn't fight back, doesn't resist. He lies still, breathing hard, tasting blood, knowing that any movement could make this worse. Crawford yanks Edmund's arms behind his back and cuffs him, too tight, metal biting into skin. "You're under arrest for resisting an officer." Edmund's voice is quiet, strained. "I didn't resist." "Shut up." The narrator's voice returns. "For minutes." That's all it took to turn a traffic stop into a national scandal. Crawford stands over Edmund, breathing hard, adrenaline flooding his system. He keys his radio. "Dispatch, one male in custody. Resisted commands. Requesting backup." He walks back to his cruiser, leaving Edmund cuffed and bleeding on the pavement. A passing car slows. The driver pulls out a phone and starts recording. Crawford shouts, "Keep moving." But the damage is already done. Multiple witnesses, multiple angles, and the body cam still recording every second. Crawford returns to the Mercedes and begins searching it. Console, glove box, under the seats. Looking for anything that might justify what he'd just done. He finds the wallet on the passenger seat. Opens it. Inside, beneath the driver's license he'd already examined, is an official identification card. Police Chief Edmund Williams. Badge number 001. Authorized to command all officers in the department. Crawford's hands start to shake. He stares at the ID, then at the man lying handcuffed on the ground, then back at the ID. His voice, barely a whisper captured by the body cam. Oh God. Oh no. No, no, no. Backup arrives 90 seconds later. Sergeant Maria Caldwell steps out of her cruiser and immediately recognizes the Mercedes. Then she sees the man on the ground. Her voice cuts through the night like a blade. Crawford, what did you do? Crawford can't speak. He just holds up the ID card, his hand trembling. Maria rushes to Edmund, dropping to her knees beside him. Chief, sir, are you all right? Edmund's voice is steady despite the blood on his face. I'm all right, Sergeant, but I need you to document everything. The stop, the assault, all of it. Yes, sir. Absolutely. She turns to Crawford, fury and horror mixing in her expression. Uncuff him. Now. Crawford fumbles with his keys, hands shaking so badly he can barely get the cuffs unlocked. Edmund sits up slowly, rubbing his wrists where the metal had bitten in. Blood drips from his lip onto his shirt. Maria helps him to his feet, her voice quiet and apologetic. Sir, I am so sorry. Edmund looks at Crawford, not with anger, but with something worse. Disappointment. Officer Crawford, he says quietly. You're suspended effective immediately. Turn over your badge and weapon to Sergeant Caldwell. Crawford's face is white. Chief, I didn't know. It shouldn't have mattered who I was. Those words hang in the air, heavy and undeniable. Edmund turns to Maria. Make sure that body cam footage is secured. Every frame of it. And call EMS. I want this documented medically. Yes, sir. Edmund walks back to his Mercedes, his movements slow and careful. He sits in the driver's seat, the door open, waiting for the ambulance. Crawford stands frozen beside his cruiser, watching his career end in real time. The body cam is still recording. By morning, the footage had leaked. It started as a rumor in the department, whispers in the locker room, hushed conversations in the break room. Then someone sent it to a local reporter, then to social media, then to national news outlets. By noon, it was everywhere. The video played on loop. Crawford dragging the chief from his vehicle, throwing him to the ground, the forearm strike, the blood. For minutes of violence that told a story everyone understood. The headlines were immediate and brutal. Rookie cop assaults his own police chief. Bodycam footage captures shocking police violence. Chief attack during traffic stop. Department in crisis. The comments sections exploded. Twitter threads went viral. Think pieces appeared within hours. The narrator's voice. The man who had fought to equip every officer with a body camera had just been saved by one. The mayor held an emergency press conference, flanked by the city attorney and looking visibly shaken. We are conducting a full investigation. This behavior does not represent the values of our department or our city. Officer Crawford has been suspended without pay, and we are cooperating fully with state and federal authorities. But the mayor's words felt hollow against the backdrop of the footage. Because everyone had seen it. The unnecessary escalation. The violence. The casual brutality of an officer who believed he could act without consequence. Civil rights organizations issued statements. The NAACP called for immediate termination and criminal charges. The police union remained conspicuously silent. Edmund Williams didn't speak to the press that first day. He went to the hospital, where doctors treated his injuries, split lip requiring 4 stitches, bruised ribs, contusions on his arms and back. The medical report documented everything in clinical detail, injuries consistent with a physical assault. When he returned home, his wife held him for a long time without saying anything. What was there to say? They'd both known this could happen, had happened to so many others. But knowing it intellectually and experiencing it were two different things. Edmund sat at his kitchen table that night, ice pack pressed to his jaw, and watched his own assault play out on the evening news. It was surreal, watching himself thrown to the ground, hearing his own voice, calm, respectful, compliant, begging for basic dignity. He turned off the television and sat in silence. The Department of Justice opened an investigation within 48 hours. Federal agents arrived to review the body cam footage, interview witnesses, and examine Crawford's training records and disciplinary history. What they found was damning. Crawford had received 3 complaints during his 6 months on the force, all for excessive use of force or unprofessional conduct. All had been marked as unfounded or unsubstantiated by his supervisors. His training records showed he'd completed only 2 of the mandatory 5 de-escalation courses. He'd scored poorly on scenario-based judgment exercises. Multiple instructors had noted concerns about his aggressive approach to citizen contact, but he'd been allowed to patrol alone anyway. The investigation also uncovered text messages from Crawford's phone, conversations with other officers that revealed a pattern of bias and contempt. Another night in the hood. Gonna rack up some stops. Pulled over 3 tonight. All fit the profile. They think they can talk back. I make sure they don't. The messages were entered into evidence. Copied. Documented. Undeniable. What would you have done in Chief Williams's position? Let us know in the comments. The federal civil rights case moved quickly. Officer Neil Crawford was terminated from the department and charged with assault under color of law, deprivation of civil rights, and filing a false police report. Chief Edmund Williams filed a $30 million civil lawsuit against Crawford and the city, alleging racial discrimination, excessive force, unlawful detention, and failure to properly train and supervise officers. The city's legal team reviewed the evidence and reached a grim conclusion. The case was indefensible. They offered a settlement. Edmund's attorneys refused. This isn't about money, his lead counsel told the press. This is about accountability. About making sure this never happens to anyone else. The trial began 8 months after the traffic stop. The courtroom was packed. Media, activists, off-duty officers, concerned citizens, everyone wanted to see how this would end. Edmund sat at the plaintiff's table, composed and dignified in a dark suit. Crawford sat across the aisle, looking smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of what he'd done. The prosecution's case was brutally straightforward. They played the Bodycam footage. All 4 minutes. No edits. No commentary. Just the raw, unfiltered reality of what had happened. The jury watched in silence. When the footage ended, several jurors were visibly shaken. One was crying. The prosecutor stood. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a case about a split-second decision in a dangerous situation. This is a case about a traffic stop that should have taken 5 minutes and resulted in nothing more than a warning or a ticket. Instead, it ended with a respected law enforcement professional, a man who has dedicated his life to serving this community, bleeding on the pavement, handcuffed, treated like a criminal because Officer Crawford decided that's how he deserved to be treated. And why? Because of a taillight that wasn't even out. Because Officer Crawford saw a black man in an expensive car and made assumptions. Because he couldn't imagine that the person behind the wheel might actually be his superior in every way that matters. The defense tried to argue mistake, honest error, fear for safety, but the footage made those arguments impossible. There was no threat, no weapon, no resistance, just a calm, compliant man trying to explain who he was while being assaulted by someone who should have been protecting him. Edmund took the stand on day 3. The prosecutor asked him to walk through the stop from his perspective. He did so calmly, without embellishment, letting the facts speak for themselves. When Officer Crawford struck me, what was your first thought? Edmund paused. My first thought was that I hoped the body camera was working, because without it, no one would believe me. The courtroom was silent. Even as a police chief, with decades of service, with credibility and institutional support, I knew that if this came down to his word against mine, there would be people who wouldn't believe me, who would assume I must have done something to deserve it. That's the reality we live in. And that's why this case matters. The defense attorney's cross-examination was brief and ineffective. Every question he asked, Edmund answered with the same calm precision that had defined his career. When he stepped down, the prosecution rested. The defense called Crawford on day 4. He looked young on the stand, scared, but also defensive, still clinging to the narrative that he'd been doing his job, that he couldn't have known that anyone would have reacted the same way. The prosecution's cross-examination was surgical. Officer Crawford, when you approached Chief Williams's vehicle, what made you suspicious? The car, the neighborhood, the time of night. What specifically about the car? It was expensive. Out of place. Out of place because... Crawford hesitated. He knew the trap. I don't know. You don't know? Let me ask you this. If a white man in a business suit had been driving that same car in that same neighborhood at that same time, would you have stopped him? Maybe. I don't know. You don't know. The prosecutor turned to the jury. The body cam knows. They played the footage again, this time focusing on Crawford's words. Let's see what you're hiding. You don't listen, do you? Shut up. Each phrase a window into assumptions, bias, contempt. The defense had no response. The jury deliberated for 7 hours. When they returned, the forepersons stood and read the verdict. In the matter of Williams versus Crawford and the city police department, we find the defendants liable on all counts: racial discrimination, excessive force, unlawful detention, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Compensatory damages, $15 million. Punitive damages, $15 million. Total, $30 million. The judge also issued a consent decree requiring the department to implement comprehensive bias training for all officers, overhaul hiring and disciplinary procedures, establish an independent civilian oversight board with subpoena power, requires psychological evaluations for all officers involved in use of force incidents. Crawford sat motionless as the verdict was read. His attorney placed a hand on his shoulder, but he didn't react. Edmund closed his eyes and took a slow breath. The narrator's voice returns. It wasn't about revenge. It was about making sure the cost of failure was too high to ignore. Neil Crawford served 18 months in federal prison for assault under color of law. When he was released, he moved across the country and disappeared from public life. He never gave an interview, never issued a statement, just carried the weight of what he'd done into whatever future he could build from the wreckage. His name became a case study in police academies nationwide, a cautionary tale about bias, aggression, and the catastrophic consequences of treating people as threats simply because of how they look. Edmund Williams used a portion of the settlement to establish the Williams Foundation for Police Accountability, a nonprofit dedicated to funding independent oversight, bias training, and policy reform in departments across the country. He returned to his position as chief and spent the next 3 years transforming the department. The reforms mandated by the consent decree were just the beginning. He created a culture where accountability wasn't feared but expected, where officers who demonstrated bias or excessive force faced real consequences, where the community had a genuine voice in how they were policed. Some officers resented him, called him a traitor, said he'd made their jobs harder. But most understood. They'd seen the footage. They'd watched their chief bleed on the pavement. And they knew that if it could happen to him, the system was broken in ways they could no longer ignore. 2 years after the trial, Edmund spoke at a national law enforcement conference. He stood at the podium, the scar on his lip barely visible now, and addressed a room full of chiefs, sheriffs, and federal agents. The night Officer Crawford assaulted me, I had a choice. I could have used my position to bury it, to make it go away quietly, to protect the department's reputation. But that's not accountability. That's complicity. The badge doesn't make us better than the people we serve. It makes us responsible to them. And when we fail that responsibility, there have to be consequences, real ones, not just words. $30 million is a lot of money. But you know what's more expensive? The cost of lost trust. The cost of communities that see police as occupiers instead of protectors. The cost of good officers leaving the profession because they're tired of being associated with the ones who abuse their power. That's the real cost. And we can't afford it anymore. The applause was long and heartfelt. The narrator's voice returns for the final time. 4 minutes of violence cost $30 million and forced an entire city to start over. The body cam footage from that October night has been viewed over 80 million times. It's used in training academies, in courtrooms, in community forums, not as entertainment, as education. It's a mirror held up to a system that too often protects the wrong people for the wrong reasons. Officer Crawford saw a black man in an expensive car and made assumptions. He saw an opportunity to assert power and took it. He never imagined there would be consequences. But Chief Williams made sure there were. Not just for Crawford. For every department that looks the other way. For every system that protects officers instead of the people they're supposed to serve. The camera captured everything. The assumptions. The violence. The blood. The truth. And now, we can't look away. If this story made you think, share it. If it made you angry, channel it. If it made you want change, demand it. Because stories like this only matter when they lead to action. Thanks for watching. The screen fades to black.
You fit a description. Give me the ID or you're coming with me.
I haven't done anything. I'm not required to show you.
Don't make this harder. Hands where I can see them and get the wallet out. Now.
You really want my ID? Department of Justice, you still detaining me?
The bodycam footage would later show exactly what happened that April 15, 2023, in the heart of Washington, D.C. Officer Eric Donnelly had been on the job for just over a year when he made the mistake that would end his career and cost the department $9 million. He saw a black man walking toward his car in a quiet residential neighborhood. No call, no crime, no reason to stop him. But Donnelly did, because in his mind, something looked off. He demanded ID, raising his voice, circling the man like a suspect. The man calmly replied, "I didn't do anything wrong." The cop kept pushing, his tone turning threatening. That man was attorney Malcolm Reeves, a respected federal lawyer who had spent nearly 2 decades defending constitutional rights in Washington courtrooms. What happened next would explode into headlines, spark a DOJ inquiry, and permanently stain the badge Donnelly once wore. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Georgetown, Washington, D.C., 4:23 p.m. The Axon body camera shows a quiet residential street. Tree-lined. Historic brownstones with iron gates. Cars parked along both sides. The kind of neighborhood where diplomats, lawyers, and politicians live. Where nothing dramatic happens. The afternoon light was soft. A few pedestrians walked past. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Officer Eric Donnelly's patrol car moved slowly down the street, his bodycam capturing the steady rhythm of routine patrol. Then it stopped. The camera showed a black man, mid-30s, well-dressed in a navy suit and tie, walking toward a silver Audi A6 parked curbside. Briefcase in hand. Keys out. Moving with purpose. The bodycam audio captured Donnelly's voice, quiet, talking to himself. Let's see what this is about. There was no dispatch call, no radio alert, no reported crime, just a black man walking to his car. And in Officer Eric Donnelly's mind, that was enough to warrant investigation. Attorney Malcolm Reeves had been with the U.S. Department of Justice for 17 years. 17 years working civil rights enforcement, constitutional litigation, and federal appellate cases. He'd argued before circuit courts. He'd defended voting rights, housing discrimination protections, and equal access to education. His colleagues called him brilliant. His opponents called him relentless. His record spoke for itself. Dozens of successful cases, multiple commendations, a reputation built on precision and principle. But that Thursday afternoon, Malcolm Reeves wasn't thinking about courtrooms or constitutional law. He was thinking about getting home. He'd just left a meeting at the Prettyman Courthouse. His daughter had a soccer game at 6 p.m. His wife was making dinner. He wanted to change out of his suit, decompress, and be present for his family. He walked to his car, clicked the unlock button, and reached for the door handle. "Hey, where you headed?" Malcolm turned and saw the patrol car. The uniformed officer stepping out. The body camera light blinking red. His first thought was practical. Is there a security issue in the neighborhood? His second thought was cautious. Stay calm. Stay polite. This will be over in a minute. He didn't know it would be over in an hour, and that it would cost Officer Donnelly his career. Officer Eric Donnelly was 25 years old and had been with the Metropolitan Police Department of the District of Columbia for 13 months. 13 months of wanting to prove himself. 13 months of believing that assertiveness meant strength and that questioning people meant being thorough. His training officer had noted in evaluations, Officer Donnelly displays initiative but lacks discernment in determining when intervention is appropriate. Tends to initiate contact based on perception rather than observable facts. But Donnelly had been cleared for solo patrol anyway. That afternoon, he'd been driving through Georgetown when he saw Malcolm walking to his car. A black man, in a suit, in this neighborhood, getting into a luxury vehicle. Something about it didn't sit right with Donnelly. He couldn't articulate what. He couldn't point to any specific behavior that suggested criminality. But the image, a black man in Georgetown, alone, at an expensive car, triggered something in his mind. Not evidence. Not reasonable suspicion. Just a feeling that this person didn't belong. And Donnelly decided to act on that feeling. The bodycam captured Donnelly's approach. His posture was rigid. His hand near his belt. His expression set. "Where you headed?" Donnelly asked, his tone immediately sharp. Malcolm kept his voice calm. "Just heading home, officer." "Is there a problem? Can I see some ID?" Malcolm frowned slightly. Can I ask why you're requesting identification? I'm conducting a check. ID, please. A check for what? I'm walking to my own car. Donnelly stepped closer. Is this your car? Malcolm's jaw tightened. Yes. It's registered in my name. You sure about that? And there it was. The implication. The assumption. Malcolm had spent his entire career defending people against exactly this kind of profiling. He knew the law. He knew his rights. And he knew what was happening. Officer, are you stopping me because you think I stole this car? I'm verifying ownership. Based on what? What did I do that gave you reasonable suspicion? Donnelly's tone hardened. Don't get smart with me. Show me your ID. I'm not being smart. I'm asking a legitimate question. What crime do you suspect me of committing? You're refusing a lawful order. It's not a lawful order if you don't have reasonable suspicion. And you don't. The body cam captured the shift in Donnelly's demeanor. From authoritative to defensive. From controlled to agitated. Because Malcolm was right. And Donnelly knew it. There was no call. No complaint. No visible offense. But in Officer Donnelly's mind, walking while black was enough to raise suspicion. The body cam footage would later be analyzed by use of force experts, civil rights attorneys, and the Department of Justice. All of them would come to the same conclusion. Officer Donnelly had no legal basis to stop Malcolm Reeves. No reasonable suspicion. No probable cause. No justification under the Fourth Amendment. He stopped him because of race. Because of perception. Because of bias. And what happened next turned that unlawful stop into a civil rights violation that would cost millions. Officer Donnelly began circling Malcolm, his body language aggressive, his questions rapid fire. Whose car is this really? I told you. It's mine. Where'd you get it? Malcolm's patience was wearing thin. I purchased it. With my own money. From a dealership. It's registered in my name. I have the title at home. You live around here? I live 3 blocks away. What do you do? I'm an attorney. Donnelly's expression shifted, not to understanding, but to skepticism. An attorney? Where? Department of Justice. Donnelly laughed. Short. Dismissive. Sure you are. Malcolm's voice stayed calm, but there was steel underneath. Officer, I've answered your questions. I've been cooperative. But I need you to understand. You don't have reasonable suspicion to detain me. I haven't committed any crime. I'm going to get in my car and leave. No, you're not. Excuse me. You're not leaving until I verify who you are. I'm not required to provide ID when I'm not committing a crime. That's established law. I decide what the law is here. Malcolm stared at him. No, you don't. The Constitution does. And that was the line that broke Donnelly's control. The body cam captured the escalation in real time. Donnelly grabbed Malcolm's arm. Turn around. Malcolm pulled back, not violently, but firmly. Don't touch me. You're being detained. For what? Obstruction. Obstruction of what? I haven't obstructed anything. You're refusing to cooperate. I'm refusing an unlawful order. There's a difference. Donnelly pulled out his handcuffs. Last chance. Turn around. Malcolm looked directly into the body cam, his voice clear and deliberate. For the record, I am Attorney Malcolm Reeves, U.S. Department of Justice. I am standing beside my own vehicle. I have committed no crime. This officer has no reasonable suspicion. And what he's about to do is illegal. Donnelly grabbed Malcolm's wrist and yanked his arm behind his back. Malcolm didn't resist physically. He knew better. But he continued speaking, his voice steady despite the adrenaline. You're violating my Fourth Amendment rights. You're committing unlawful detention. And this is all being recorded. The handcuffs clicked into place. A few pedestrians had stopped to watch. One pulled out a phone and started recording. Donnelly pushed Malcolm against the car, his hands moving quickly, pat down, checking pockets. What are you doing? Malcolm asked. Search incident to arrest. You haven't arrested me. And even if you had, you need probable cause for a search. Donnelly's hand went into Malcolm's inside jacket pocket and pulled out a black leather wallet. He opened it and froze. The body cam captured the moment perfectly. Inside the wallet was a federal identification badge. Gold. Official. Department of Justice seal. Attorney Malcolm Reeves. Civil Rights Division. U.S. Department of Justice. Donnelly's breathing quickened. His hand holding the badge started to shake. Wait, what is this? Malcolm's voice was cold. That's my government ID. I'm an attorney with the Department of Justice. Like I told you. Multiple times. Silence. The body cam audio captured Donnelly's whisper. Shit. Malcolm turned his head slightly, looking back at Donnelly. You just illegally arrested a federal attorney. On camera. With witnesses. For no crime. Based solely on the color of my skin. Donnelly stood frozen, still holding the badge, his mind clearly racing through the implications. Malcolm continued, his voice steady. You're going to uncuff me now, and then you're going to call your supervisor. Because what you just did is a federal civil rights violation, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows about it. Donnelly didn't move for several seconds. Then, slowly, he unlocked the handcuffs. Malcolm pulled his hands forward, rubbing his wrists where the metal had dug into his skin. He took his badge back and put it in his pocket. What's your badge number? Malcolm asked. Donnelly's voice was barely audible. 6-3-4-8. And your supervisor's name? Captain Reynolds. Malcolm pulled out his phone and started typing. I'm documenting everything. Date, time, location, your badge number, the witnesses. And I'm filing a formal complaint the moment I get home. A second patrol car pulled up. A more senior officer, Sergeant Patricia Monroe, stepped out and immediately sensed the tension. What's going on here? Monroe asked. Malcolm held up his Department of Justice badge. I'm Attorney Malcolm Reeves, DOJ Civil Rights Division. Your officer stopped me without reasonable suspicion, demanded ID without legal justification, and arrested me when I asserted my constitutional rights. The entire encounter is on his body camera. Monroe's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. She looked at Donnelly. Is this true? Donnelly stammered. I thought. Did you have reasonable suspicion to stop him? He was walking toward a car. That's not a crime. Did you have reasonable suspicion of criminal activity? Silence. Monroe turned to Malcolm. Attorney Reeves, I apologize. This should not have happened. Malcolm's voice was firm. An apology isn't enough. Your officer racially profiled me, violated my rights, and illegally arrested me. I want a formal investigation. I want disciplinary action. And I'm pursuing legal action. Monroe nodded grimly. You have every right to do so. I'll personally ensure this is reported to Internal Affairs. Malcolm looked at Donnelly one more time. You saw a black man in a suit and assumed I was a criminal. You didn't see a federal attorney. You didn't see someone who spent 17 years defending civil rights. You just saw my skin color. And you acted on your bias. Donnelly couldn't meet his eyes. Malcolm got into his car and drove away, his hands still shaking with adrenaline and anger, leaving Donnelly standing on the street, realizing that his 13-month career was effectively over. By 9 p.m., the footage had leaked. Not the body cam. That was being held by Internal Affairs. But the witness cell phone video, shot from across the street, showing the handcuffing, the search, Malcolm's calm statements, Donnelly's realization. By midnight, it was on social media. Clips circulating on Twitter under hashtag Justice for Malcolm. Reshared on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. By the next morning, it was on the news. Federal attorney illegally arrested by D.C. police. DOJ lawyer detained without cause in Georgetown. Civil rights violation caught on camera. The Washington Post ran a front-page story. The New York Times picked it up. CNN featured legal experts analyzing the video. The consensus was unanimous. Officer Donnelly had committed an egregious violation of Malcolm Reeves's constitutional rights. And he'd done it to the wrong person, someone who knew the law better than most judges. The Department of Justice moved quickly. The Office of Professional Responsibility opened an internal inquiry. The Civil Rights Division, Malcolm's own division, issued a statement calling the incident deeply concerning and inconsistent with the constitutional protections all Americans deserve. The FBI's Civil Rights Unit began a preliminary investigation into whether Donnelly's actions constituted a pattern or practice of discrimination. The U.S. Attorney's Office for D.C. reviewed the case to determine whether federal criminal charges were appropriate. The pressure was immense. Federal, public, institutional, and the Metropolitan Police Department had no defense. Internal Affairs reviewed Donnelly's body camera footage and came to an immediate conclusion. The stop was unlawful, the arrest was unjustified, and the entire encounter violated department policy and constitutional law. They also pulled Donnelly's service record and found troubling patterns. In 13 months, he'd initiated 42 stops. 34 involved people of color. Only 6 resulted in citations or arrests. The rest were deemed investigatory, but produced no evidence of crime. The pattern was clear. Donnelly had been profiling consistently. The department just hadn't been paying attention. Malcolm Reeves gave a statement to the press 3 days after the incident. He stood on the courthouse steps, his expression serious but composed. What happened to me wasn't unique. It happens every day to Black Americans who don't have badges, who don't have law degrees, who don't have institutional backing. The only difference is I had the resources to fight back. But this case isn't about me. It's about what happens when authority goes unchecked. When officers make assumptions based on skin color rather than evidence. When bias is allowed to operate behind a badge. I'm pursuing legal action not for revenge, but for accountability. Because if this can happen to a federal attorney in broad daylight in Georgetown, it can happen to anyone. And that's not acceptable. The statement was measured, professional, devastating. And it set the tone for what came next. Malcolm filed a federal civil rights lawsuit 4 months after the incident. The complaint named Officer Eric Donnelly, Sergeant Patricia Monroe, for inadequate supervision, and the District of Columbia as defendants. The claims were comprehensive. Fourth Amendment violation, unlawful seizure and arrest without probable cause. 14th Amendment violation, racial discrimination violation of D.C. Human Rights Act, false arrest, and false imprisonment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, municipal liability for inadequate training and supervision. The evidence was overwhelming. Body camera footage, witness video, Donnelly's service record showing a pattern of discriminatory stops, expert testimony on racial profiling, and the plaintiff was a federal attorney who could argue his own case if necessary. The city's attorneys reviewed the evidence and came to a swift conclusion. Settlement was the only option. They couldn't win at trial. They couldn't discredit Malcolm. They couldn't explain away Donnelly's actions. Negotiations began. Initial offer, $2 million. Malcolm's attorneys rejected it. Second offer, $5 million. Rejected again. $9 million, they said. Plus termination of Officer Donnelly. Plus mandatory reforms. Plus independent oversight. Plus public acknowledgement of civil rights violation. Non-negotiable. The city agreed. $9 million. One of the largest settlements in D.C. history for an individual civil rights case. Officer Eric Donnelly was terminated 7 months after the incident. The termination letter was final and comprehensive. Officer Donnelly engaged in racial profiling, unlawful detention, and illegal arrest of a federal attorney. He stopped the plaintiff without reasonable suspicion, demanded identification without legal justification, and arrested him for asserting constitutional rights. His actions violated department policy, violated constitutional protections, and exposed the district to significant legal liability. His employment is terminated immediately, and his law enforcement certification is permanently revoked. His name was entered into the National Decertification Index. At 25 years old, 13 months into his career, it was over. Malcolm Reeves returned to work at the Department of Justice. But he was different now. More cautious. More aware of how he moved through the world. More conscious that his federal badge didn't always protect him. And he used his experience. He began speaking at police training academies about constitutional rights and the dangers of racial profiling. He advised on bias reduction programs. He testified before congressional committees about law enforcement accountability. His case became a teaching tool, a reference point, an example of what happens when bias overrides law. The $9 million settlement funded several initiatives. Independent Oversight Board for MPD with investigative authority, mandatory bias training for all officers before solo patrol, real-time body camera review, protocols, public database of stops, searches, and complaints, community advisory panels with policy input. The reforms were significant, but Malcolm knew they weren't enough. Money doesn't change culture, he said in an interview 6 months later. Policies don't change beliefs. Real change requires officers to examine their own biases, to question why they feel suspicion, to recognize that their assumptions aren't evidence. He paused. Officer Donnelly saw me and assumed I was a criminal, not because of what I was doing, but because of what I looked like. That assumption, that automatic link between blackness and criminality, is what we have to dismantle. And that work is harder than any lawsuit. The Bodycam footage remains. It's shown in law schools as an example of unlawful detention. It's shown in police academies as a cautionary tale. It's cited in civil rights litigation as precedent. And it serves as a reminder. Entitlement with a badge is still dangerous. Power without restraint still destroys lives. Officer Donnelly had a badge, a gun, and the authority of the state. But he didn't have wisdom. He didn't have discernment. He didn't have the ability to distinguish between his biases and actual evidence. So when he saw Malcolm Reeves walking to his car, he didn't see a federal attorney. He didn't see a civil rights advocate. He didn't see someone who'd spent 17 years defending the Constitution. He only saw a black man. And that was enough to trigger suspicion, escalation, and a legal arrest. In the end, attorney Malcolm Reeves didn't just win a settlement. He exposed a truth that money can't erase. Entitlement with a badge is still dangerous. Power without restraint still destroys lives. And justice isn't automatic. It requires documentation. It requires courage. It requires people like Malcolm who refuse to accept that their rights can be violated simply because of the color of their skin. Justice isn't revenge. It's accountability. And sometimes, it takes a camera and the courage to say no to prove it. Final reflection, 29:30-30:00. Officer Eric Donnelly's career lasted 13 months. His decision to profile Malcolm Reeves lasted 3 minutes. But the consequences will last forever. $9 million paid by taxpayers. A career destroyed. A reputation stained. And a federal attorney who will never forget the day he was handcuffed on a Georgetown street for the crime of walking to his own car. The bodycam footage doesn't lie. It shows exactly what happened. And what it shows is uncomfortable. A black man, doing nothing wrong, stopped by an officer who couldn't see past his own bias. An attorney who knew his rights, violated by an officer who didn't care. A moment of entitlement that cost millions and exposed the truth that America still struggles to accept. Black people are presumed suspicious until proven innocent. And sometimes, not even federal credentials are enough to change that presumption. Malcolm Reeves got justice. But justice came after humiliation, after violation, after having to prove his innocence for doing nothing wrong. And that's the uncomfortable truth. Accountability only came because Malcolm had power, because he had a badge, because he could fight back. What about everyone else?
Stop right there. Hands where I can see them.
Whoa, what's the problem? I'm just walking.
Keep your hands up. Turn around.
Seriously, officer, what's going on?
We got a report of a car theft suspect matching your description. Keep your hands where I can see him.
You got the wrong guy. I'm off duty. Look, FBI, Special Agent Harris.
Officer Tyler Bronson had only 4 months on the Miami Police Department when he made the kind of decision that doesn't just end a career, it stains your name forever. It happened on a quiet morning in a peaceful residential neighborhood, the kind of place where nothing dramatic happens. People walk dogs. Sprinklers quietly ticked across trimmed lawns. He saw a black man walking casually down the sidewalk wearing gray shorts, a dark blue hoodie, blue running shoes, holding coffee and a wallet in his hand. Nothing suspicious. No sign of crime. But Bronson convinced himself in that moment that this man was scouting cars. He decided to intervene before anything even existed. The man he targeted was Special Agent Harris, a federal FBI agent. What happens next costs the department over $2 million and destroys Bronson's entire future. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. A quiet neighborhood in Miami where the streets are lined with palm trees and the houses sit back from the road with manicured lawns. Morning had just broken, soft light, cool air, the kind of calm that makes you forget you're in a city at all. This was the kind of place where people jogged before work, where retirees walked their dogs, where nothing ever really happened. It was 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Special Agent Harris had been with the FBI for 11 years. 11 years working cybercrime, organized fraud investigations, and multi-agency task forces. He'd testified in federal court. He'd coordinated with Interpol. He'd been recognized twice for excellence in field work. His supervisors trusted him. His colleagues respected him. But that morning, he wasn't working a case. He wasn't executing a warrant. He wasn't even in agent mode. He was just a man taking a morning walk. Harris lived 3 blocks from where the incident would occur. He'd gone out for his usual routine, a light jog, then a cool-down walk with coffee from the corner cafe. Gray athletic shorts, dark blue hoodie, blue running shoes, his wallet in one hand, his coffee in the other. He wasn't looking into cars. He wasn't casing homes. He was just existing. But sometimes, for some people, that's enough. Tyler Bronson was 24 years old. He'd graduated from the police academy 4 months earlier, full of energy, idealism, and the kind of confidence that comes from believing you're going to make a difference. He wanted to be proactive. He wanted to catch criminals before they acted. He wanted to be the officer who saw patterns others missed. His training officer had signed off on him 2 weeks prior, clearing him for solo patrol. No major incidents in his file yet. No complaints. Just a rookie trying to prove himself. That morning, Bronson was assigned to a residential patrol route in Coral Gables, one of the quieter zones, the kind of assignment that let newer officers get comfortable without too much pressure. He drove slowly through the tree-lined streets, windows down, radio low, scanning. And then he saw him, a black man, walking down the sidewalk, holding something in his hands, moving at a relaxed pace. To most people, it would have looked like a neighbor out for a morning stroll, someone who belonged. But Tyler Bronson saw something else. This is where bias becomes action. Bronson didn't see a federal agent. He didn't see a professional with a spotless record. He didn't see someone who lived in the neighborhood, who paid taxes, who had every right to walk down that street. He saw a black man in a hoodie. And in his mind, trained by years of media narratives, shaped by implicit bias he'd never examined, that image connected to crime. Bronson slowed his patrol car and watched. Harris walked past a row of parked cars. He glanced at one briefly. A casual look, the kind anyone gives when walking past something shiny or unfamiliar. Bronson's mind filled in the rest. He's checking door handles. He's scouting. He's planning something. None of it was real. But Bronson believed it anyway. He pulled over, put the car in park, and stepped out. This was proactive policing, he told himself. This was stopping crime before it happened. This was doing his job. But there was no crime. There was no victim. There was no evidence. There was only assumption. You think rookies should be required to do psychological bias courses before patrol solo? Drop your answer below. Tyler Bronson closed the patrol car door and walked toward Harris, his hand resting on his duty belt. Excuse me, Bronson called out, his tone firm. Can I talk to you for a second? Special Agent Harris stopped and turned. He saw the uniform, the patrol car, the rookie confidence radiating off the young officer. He'd been through this before. Not often, but enough to know how it could go. Good morning, officer, Harris said calmly. What can I do for you? What are you doing out here? Harris blinked. Walking. I live 3 blocks that way. He gestured with his coffee cup. You live here? Bronson's tone carried skepticism, like the idea was implausible. Yes, I do. What's your name? Harris. Special Agent Harris. I'm with the FBI. Bronson's expression didn't change. If anything, it hardened. FBI, huh? Yes. You got ID to prove that? Harris nodded slowly. I do. But can I ask why you're stopping me? I haven't done anything wrong. And there it was again. The question that should matter. The question that should make an officer pause and reassess. But Bronson didn't pause. I'll ask the questions, he said, his voice sharper now. I saw you looking into cars. You got a reason for that. Harris frowned. Looking into cars? I was just walking. I glanced at a vehicle. That's not a crime. Depends on your intent. My intent. Harris's voice stayed calm, but there was an edge to it now. My intent was to walk to my house. That's it. Bronson's jaw tightened. Show me your ID. This is where the psychology of the stop matters. Tyler Bronson had already decided what he was looking at. In his mind, Harris wasn't an FBI agent. He was a suspect. Someone trying to talk his way out of trouble. Someone using the "on law enforcement" line as a deflection. Bronson had heard that tactic before, in training scenarios, in stories from senior officers. Criminals claiming to be cops, feds, military. It was a classic move. So when Harris said he was FBI, Bronson didn't believe him. And when Harris stayed calm, too calm, in Bronson's mind, it read as defiance, as smugness, as someone who thought he was smarter than the rookie cop. Bronson's adrenaline spiked. His pride kicked in, and his training, already thin, started to unravel. Harris reached slowly into the pocket of his hoodie. I'm going to get my credentials now. They're in my pocket. Keep your hands where I can see them. They're where you can see them. I'm telling you what I'm doing before I do it. That's protocol. Harris pulled out his FBI credentials, a black leather case with his badge and identification card. He opened it and held it out. Bronson glanced at it. Barely. That could be fake, he said. Harris stared at him, disbelief creeping into his expression. Officer, that is a legitimate federal credential. You can verify it. Call your dispatch. Call the FBI field office. My badge number is right there. Anyone can buy a badge online. This isn't from online. This is real. I'm a special agent. I've been with the Bureau for 11 years. Bronson's hand moved closer to his baton. I think you need to come with me so we can sort this out. Harris's voice stayed controlled, but the frustration was building. Sort what out? I've identified myself. I've shown you my credentials. There's nothing to sort out. You stopped me without cause. I stopped you because you were acting suspicious. I was walking. You were looking into cars. I glanced at a car. Once. While walking. That's not suspicious behavior, and you know it. Bronson stepped closer. I need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back. Harris's eyes widened. You're arresting me? I'm detaining you until I can verify your story. My story? This isn't a story. This is my life. I'm an FBI agent. You're making a serious mistake. Turn around. No. And that one word, that refusal to comply with an unlawful order, was all Bronson needed to justify what came next at IS, pre-crime assumption. The most dangerous form of policing? Let me know what you think. The tension between them snapped like a wire pulled too tight. Tyler Bronson saw defiance. He saw resistance. He saw someone who needed to be controlled. Special Agent Harris saw a rookie making a career-ending mistake. And he was trying, desperately, to stop it before it went too far. Officer, Harris said, his voice firm now, but still measured. I am not resisting. I am not fleeing. I am not a threat. But I am also not going to comply with an unlawful detention. You have no probable cause. You have no reasonable suspicion. You have nothing but an assumption. Bronson's face flushed. I have a suspicious individual refusing to comply. I'm not refusing to comply. I'm refusing to be violated. There's a difference. Turn around. Call your supervisor. Right now, before this gets worse. But Bronson wasn't listening anymore. In his mind, the situation had already escalated. Harris's calm demeanor, his legal language, his refusal to submit, it all registered as a challenge. And Tyler Bronson couldn't back down. He reached for Harris's arm. Harris pulled back instinctively. Not violently, not aggressively, but firmly. Don't touch me. Bronson grabbed harder. Stop resisting. I'm not resisting. You have no right. Bronson yanked Harris's arm, trying to spin him around. Harris kept his balance, his training kicking in. Don't escalate. Don't fight back, but don't submit to a legal force either. Let go of me. Harris said, his voice louder now. You're assaulting a federal agent. Bronson didn't let go. Instead, he pulled his baton, and everything changed. The first strike came fast, a swing aimed at Harris's shoulder, meant to create compliance through pain. Harris twisted, blocking with his forearm, the coffee cup dropping from his hand and splattering across the pavement. Stop, Harris shouted. I'm FBI. I'm a federal agent. Bronson swung again. This time, the baton connected, a glancing blow to Harris's ribs that sent a sharp jolt of pain through his side. Harris stumbled back, his hands up, his credentials still in one hand. You're making a mistake. Stop. But Bronson was in it now. Adrenaline, fear, pride, all of it pushing him forward. He lunged at Harris, trying to force him to the ground. Harris resisted, not to fight, but to protect himself, to stay standing, to stay conscious. The two men struggled, locked in a confrontation that should never have happened. And then Harris's training took over. He didn't strike back. He didn't escalate. But he used his body weight, his balance, his knowledge of defensive tactics to keep from being pinned. For a moment, they were at a stalemate, Bronson trying to dominate, Harris trying to survive. And then a voice cut through the chaos. Bronson, stand down. A second patrol car had pulled up. Officer Sandra Rivas, a 7-year veteran, stepped out of her vehicle and assessed the scene in seconds. What the hell are you doing? She shouted. Bronson froze, his baton still raised, breathing hard. Harris straightened, his chest heaving, his ribs aching, his credentials still clutched in his hand. He attacked me, Harris said, his voice shaking now, not from fear, but from disbelief. I'm a federal agent. And he attacked me. Engagement question. Why do some officers interpret calmness as defiance? Comment your thoughts. Officer Rivas walked toward them, her hand raised in a calming gesture. Both of you, stop moving, she said firmly. Then she looked at Bronson. What's going on? Bronson stammered, his adrenaline still pumping. He was looking into cars. I stopped him. He refused to comply. I identified myself. Harris cut in, his voice sharp. I showed him my FBI credentials. He called them fake. Then he attacked me. Rivas's eyes narrowed. FBI credentials? Harris held up the black leather case, still open, the gold badge catching the morning light. Rivas stepped closer and examined it. Her expression shifted immediately. Bronson, she said quietly, her tone dropping into something cold and dangerous. This is real. It can't be. It's real. This is a federal badge. Active duty. Special Agent Harris, FBI. Bronson's face went pale. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Rivas turned to Harris. Sir, I am so sorry. Are you injured? Harris touched his ribs gingerly. I'll survive, but I want a full report. I want his body camera footage, and I want to know what happens next. You'll have all of it, Rivas promised. Then she turned back to Bronson, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Get back in your car. Don't say another word. Don't move. Don't do anything until a supervisor gets here. Bronson nodded mutely, his hands trembling. A small crowd had gathered. Neighbors on porches, a jogger stopped mid-run, someone with their phone out, recording. The evidence was everywhere. The truth was undeniable. And Tyler Bronson's career was over before it had really begun. Within minutes, a supervisor arrived, Sergeant Luis Ochoa, a 14-year veteran with no tolerance for reckless policing. He spoke briefly with Rivas, then with Harris, then finally turned to Bronson. You attacked a federal agent? Ochoa's voice was calm, but the anger underneath was palpable. I didn't know. You didn't verify. You didn't call it in. You didn't listen when he identified himself. You just assumed. Bronson looked at the ground. Ochoa shook his head. You're done for the day. Go back to the station. Don't talk to anyone. Don't post anything. Don't do anything. Internal Affairs will contact you. Bronson nodded and walked back to his patrol car, moving like a man in a daze. Special Agent Harris stood with Officer Rivas and Sergeant Ochoa, still processing what had just happened. I need to make a formal complaint, Harris said. This wasn't just a bad stop. This was an assault. On a federal agent. In my own neighborhood. You'll have every resource you need, Ochoa said. The FBI will be notified. Internal Affairs will investigate. And I can tell you right now, this officer will not be on the street again. Harris nodded, but the anger was still there, simmering beneath his professional composure. I've been doing this for 11 years, he said quietly. I've worked with local PD in 6 states. I've never had an officer refuse to verify my credentials and then attack me. This isn't just incompetence. This is bias. This is what happens when you train people to see threats where there aren't any. Ochoa didn't disagree, because he couldn't. This moment, this single encounter on a quiet morning in Coral Gables, would define Tyler Bronson's life. It would cost the city millions. And it would force an entire department to confront the consequences of sending undertrained, biased officers onto the street. Should officers lose certification immediately after proven wrongful force? Drop your answer. By noon, the story had reached the FBI Miami field office. By 3 p.m., it was in the hands of federal investigators. By evening, it was national news. FBI agent attacked by Miami rookie cop during morning walk. Federal officer assaulted after showing credentials to police. Miami PD under fire after agent beaten in own neighborhood. The headlines wrote themselves. The outrage was immediate. The FBI filed a formal complaint with the Miami Police Department within 24 hours. Not a request, not a suggestion, a demand for accountability. The Department of Justice opened a civil rights investigation. Internal Affairs launched a full review of Tyler Bronson's training, his academy records, his field evaluations. What they found wasn't encouraging. Bronson had passed his academy exams, but his psychological evaluation had noted tendencies toward over-assertion in uncertain situations. His field training officer had flagged him twice for premature escalation, but signed off on him anyway, citing department staffing needs. He'd been cleared for solo patrol after just 12 weeks of supervision. The standard was 16. The department had rushed him, and now they were paying the price. Civil rights attorneys contacted Special Agent Harris within days. This wasn't just about an unlawful stop. This was about assault, battery, violation of civil rights. And it had happened to a federal agent, someone with the credibility, resources, and standing to take the case all the way. The lawsuit named Tyler Bronson, his training officer, his supervisor, and the Miami Police Department itself. The allegations were damning. Unlawful stop without reasonable suspicion, failure to verify credentials, assault with a deadly weapon, the baton, violation of federal civil rights, deliberate indifference by the department in training and supervision. The city's attorneys reviewed the case and came to a fast conclusion. This was indefensible. Body camera footage showed everything. Harris identifying himself. Harris showing his credentials. Bronson refusing to verify. Bronson attacking. There was no gray area. No ambiguity. No room for interpretation. The city settled before it went to trial. Over $2 million. Paid to Special Agent Harris. Funded by taxpayers. Tyler Bronson was terminated 6 weeks after the incident. The termination letter was brief and final. Officer Bronson engaged in conduct that violated department policy, state law, and federal civil rights statutes. He failed to exercise sound judgment, ignored established protocol, and used force without justification. His employment is terminated effective immediately, but the consequences went further. Bronson's name was entered into the National Decertification Index, a database that tracks officers who've been fired or had their certifications revoked. It meant no other department would hire him. Not in Florida. Not anywhere. His law enforcement career was over. Permanently. He tried to appeal. The union backed him initially, but once the FBI's evidence was made public, they quietly withdrew their support. Bronson issued a brief statement through an attorney. I made a serious error in judgment. I failed to properly verify Special Agent Harris's credentials, and I reacted in a way that was inconsistent with my training. I take full responsibility for my actions, and I apologize to Agent Harris and the community. It didn't matter. The damage was done. Special Agent Harris testified at the Internal Affairs hearing, his testimony measured but powerful. I didn't ask to be the face of this issue, he said. I didn't want this attention. But if my experience prevents this from happening to someone else, someone without a badge, without federal backing, without the ability to fight back, then it was worth it. He paused. Officer Bronson saw me and made an assumption. Not based on evidence. Not based on behavior. Based on bias. And when I didn't submit to that bias, he attacked me. That's not policing. That's violence with a badge. The room was silent. I've worked with good cops. I've worked with great cops. People who risk their lives to protect others. But I've also seen what happens when departments rush training, ignore red flags, and put officers on the street before they're ready. And this is the result. The Miami Police Department announced a series of reforms 6 months later. Extended field training from 12 weeks to 20 weeks. Mandatory bias training before solo patrol. Real-time body camera uploads to prevent tampering. A new review process for use of force incidents involving federal agents or other law enforcement. The reforms were significant, but they came too late for Tyler Bronson. And they came only after a federal agent was attacked in his own neighborhood, and the city had to pay millions to settle the case. Are rookie officers rushed onto the street too fast? Let me know in the comments. This wasn't an accident. Let's be clear about that. Tyler Bronson didn't stumble into a bad decision. He made a series of deliberate choices to stop a man without cause, to ignore his credentials, to escalate instead of verify, to use force instead of reason. And those choices weren't random. They were rooted in something deeper, something that training should have addressed but didn't. Bias. Assumption. The projection of criminality onto someone who was just existing. The uncomfortable truth is that stories like this happen because we allow them to. We allow departments to rush rookies through training because they're understaffed. We allow officers to patrol solo before they're ready because it saves money. We allow bias to go unchecked because we pretend colorblindness is the same as fairness. We allow the system to repeat the same mistakes over and over until someone with the power to fight back, someone like Special Agent Harris, forces accountability. But what about everyone else? What about the people who don't have an FBI badge? What about the people who can't afford attorneys? What about the people whose encounters with officers like Tyler Bronson don't end with million-dollar settlements? They end with injury, trauma, or death. Those stories don't always make headlines. But they're happening. Every day, Tyler Bronson's career is over. That's a fact. The city paid over $2 million. That's a fact. But accountability for one officer and one settlement isn't enough. The real question is, What changes now? Do departments finally admit that 4 months of training isn't enough? Do they finally accept that bias isn't something you can ignore away? Do they finally acknowledge that rushing officers onto the street puts everyone at risk, including the officers themselves? Because if we don't change the system that allowed Tyler Bronson to attack a federal agent in broad daylight, then we're just waiting for the next rookie, the next victim, the next $2 million settlement. Comment below if you believe rookie officers should need 2 years supervised field training before solo patrol. And if you think stories like this matter, if you believe we need to keep exposing these patterns and demanding better, then hit that subscribe button. Because we're not stopping. We're going to keep telling these stories.